With us now, President and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation and former head of the Government Accountability Office, David Walker. He's also the author of Comeback America, Turning the Country Around and Restoring Fiscal Responsibility. Last week, David testified before the House Financial Services Subcommittee about America's rising debt and warned that America could be like Greece in only 10 years.
Wow.
You know, David, I've been saying in speeches for some time that California, I said, you want to know the future of America? Look no further than California. Now we can say America is California in 3 or 4 years. America is Greece in a decade if we don't turn things around.
We need to look at the metrics. If you look at total federal, state, and local public debt, the United States is worse than Ireland. It's worse than Spain. It's worse than the United Kingdom. It's not as bad as Portugal and Greece, but we'll be where Greece is within 10 years. You know, Greece used to be a great civilization. We need to learn from history and start making tough choices.
David, it's very simple. Our governments have made more promises than they can carry out.
Federal spending is up 300% net of inflation in the last 40 years. Entitlement programs have expanded.
Say that one more time.
300% net of inflation in the last 40 years. The government has promised too much, waited too long, delivered too little. At all levels of government, we're going to have to make tough choices, and taxes are going up.
Why is it that Republicans take control of Washington, spending goes up, Democrats promise in 06 they're going to change things, spending continues to go up? Why is it that neither party can actually just say no?
There is no party of fiscal responsibility. As you know, Joe, there's something now that our founding fathers never intended. It's called career politicians. They get elected. They may or may not have real-world experience. They want to stay there forever. They get rewarded by making promises. And there's two kinds of taxes, current taxes and deferred taxes. And deficits represent deferred taxes with interest that our kids and grandkids will have to pay at some point in time.
We look at the riots in Greece, and we ask the question in sarcastic tones, could it happen here? But I remember actually my dad getting a lot of groans on this show when he talked about the sort of moral difference between the rich and the poor in this country and the greed that is so pervasive that it could get people angry to the point where they start acting out. What would bring us to this point, though? Are we headed on a road to this?
Well, Mika, first, there is a growing gap between the haves and have-nots in the world, including the United States. But believe it or not, 47% of Americans pay no income taxes whatsoever. And income taxes end up funding national defense, homeland security, federal judicial system, etc. And so we do need to deal with the growing inequities. At the same point in time, we have to be realistic about what promises we make, what we can deliver. We have to control spending, and we got to make sure we generate enough revenues to be able to pay our bills and deliver on the promises we intend to keep.
David, do you believe in the value-added tax?
I believe that it's something that's going to have to be on the table as a more consumption tax approach. But I also believe this, that the American people shouldn't be asked to have new taxes imposed until we have tough statutory budget controls in place, round one of social insurance reforms, and round one of spending reprioritization and constraint.
We have had not riots on the scale, obviously, of Greece, but in fact there have been very difficult pushbacks on the part of people who are the beneficiaries of the entitlement programs. Nobody has ever been able to take on Medicare, for example, or Social Security, and we know that that's a train wreck coming down the line because we're not going to be able to support those programs as they're presently constituted. Going all the way back to Danny Rostenkowski and others, there have been any number of people who've said, not going to go there anymore.
Well, Tom, as you know, Medicare is underfunded $38 trillion.
Right.
$38 trillion.
Medicare itself blows a hole in this country's fiscal deck.
And the latest legislation really didn't help us much in that. But the good news is Social Security, while it's underfunded about $7 trillion, we can reform it to make it solvent, sustainable, secure, more savings-oriented, exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans next year with leadership.
By advancing the retirement age is
several things, Tom. First, for people that are currently retired or right at retirement, little to no changes. You gradually increase the normal and early retirement age over a number of years and then index it to life expectancy. You strengthen the benefit for people near the poverty level. Provide somewhat less of a replacement rate for middle and upper income. raise the taxable wage-based cap, but don't eliminate it, and add a supplemental savings account on top, because we have to get our savings rate up and reduce our reliance on foreign.
Given the disparity in income levels in this country, do you think we can get to means testing on Medicare, for example, where the people who have greater wealth will pay in or will not get the same amount of benefits of those at the bottom?
Tom, I definitely think if you take Medicare Part B and Medicare Part D, billionaires get subsidies, taxpayer subsidies, for voluntarily signing up for those programs. Yes, we need more means testing.
Hey, let me ask you, John Heilman. You were out on the campaign trail, obviously lived on the campaign trail in 07 and 08. Did you hear anybody talking about this? Means testing? Because we all know, that Social Security, there's going to have to be changes. Medicare is going to have to be cut back. Do you think it's a leap to believe that somebody in 2012 will say that?
Well, the world's just going to be really different in 2012 than it was in 2007, 2008. Remember, we did how until the middle of 2008, this was a campaign that took place. That campaign was a campaign that took place in a period of relative prosperity. And these issues, the pressingness, the political imperatives around these issues tend to recede in periods of economic abundance, and they tend to rise to the surface in periods of economic difficulty. So, you think about when Perot got his traction back in 91, 92, it was when people were in the middle of a recession. People were looking at the difficult choices that had to come about. But my question is, beyond the cyclicality of it, I think so, to your point, Joe, in 2012, do I think there's an opening for a candidate who ran that way? I do. But my question for David is, given how resistant both parties are to doing these things, what's the institutional framework for making tough choices, not on Social Security, but on Medicare? How do we get that done?
Maybe we'll do it after break.
No, go ahead.
Well, real quick, you need to have a special process that will set the table for a tough vote on budget controls, social insurance reforms, and taxes. You need to do it as a package at once, and you have to educate and engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough truth.
But the problem is, though, Mika, we had cuts in Medicare, but guess what those cuts were used to do? Fund a new entitlement program.
That's a good point.
Where are these people living? Because it's not in 2010.
In Greece. All right, David Walker, thank you very much.
You can't reduce costs by expanding coverage. It's an oxymoron.
Exactly. We're going to give 31 million people insurance, and it's going to cost less.
Yes,
Oxymoron is
what we can afford.
What we can afford.
All right, David Walker, thank you. The book is Come Back America.